Alright, so today I want to introduce you to the Nightbringer ball python. You may not have heard of the Nightbringer. There's not a whole lot of them over on Morphmarket, and it's actually the combination of two genes, the black pastel and the blackhead, two dark morphs. And when they come together to make a combination, let me tell you, it's one of the most impressive combinations as far as dark combinations. And when you work other genes into the Nightbringer, you can make some really amazing combinations. So today I want to jump over to the internet, and now I want to show you the amazing potential of the Nightbringer ball python. Alright, so I'm going to jump over here on morphmarket.com, and I want to show you the two genes that make up the Nightbringer. And the first one I want to show you is the blackhead. This is what a blackhead looks like. And when it comes to dark morphs, I'd say the blackhead is probably the darkest of the dark. If you actually work blackhead into other combinations, a lot of times it'll darken it a lot more than any other gene. It's pretty amazing. And when you just look at the blackhead, it looks almost like a normal ball python. Not really that much of a pattern mutation as a standalone morph, but it really darkens the background in a lot of combos. And here is another component of the Nightbringer, and that is the black pastel. And the black pastel is kind of interesting. If you actually take two black pastels and breed them together, you get a completely patternless, almost jet black snake. It is probably one of the most amazing combos, the super black pastel. And here's what happens if you take the blackhead and you mix it with a black pastel. Take a look at this. This is the Nightbringer, and take a look at this combo. It's pretty amazing how much it really has a lot of pattern and a lot of contrast between a lot of the brights and the darks. Really has a super jet black background and kind of this crazy pattern on the side, and sometimes it actually has some white coming up the sides, and especially right behind the neck it has these crazy stripes. It's a pretty amazing combination just by itself. And I actually pulled up another example of the Nightbringer. Take a look at this. This is a little bit different and not quite as high of a contrast, but it is really an impressive combination between two dark genes. Pretty amazing snake. So this is the GHI, and when you work GHI into the Nightbringer, essentially what you're doing is you're working three dark genes into a single snake, which is pretty amazing. It's a pretty amazing combination, and the GHI is a dark morph. It'll also darken the background, and the GHI is a pattern enhancer, so a lot of times it'll really jumble up the pattern. And here's what happens if you work the GHI into the Nightbringer. Take a look at this. This is a pretty interesting combination. The first thing I kind of thought of when I saw this is the DJI Mojave, where a lot of times if you work Mojave into DJI, it'll bring all the pattern right to the top and pretty much wipe out the sides of the combination. And it's kind of an interesting effect between the DJI, the blackhead, and the black pastel. So here is the lesser ball python. The lesser is actually in the blue-eyed leucistic complex. So if you breed it with another lesser, you'll get an all-white snake with bright blue eyes. And kind of the limitation and kind of the advantage of working the lesser in with the blue-eyed leucistic is you can actually work it in with other genes in the blue-eyed leucistic, and there's quite a few of them. There is the bamboo, the lesser, the russo, the Mojave, the mocha, the phantom, the mystic, the special, all those. If you actually combine those genes with the lesser, you get a bright white snake with blue eyes, which is pretty amazing. Sometimes you want the white snake, and sometimes you kind of want to avoid it, because if you end up making the white snake, a lot of times it'll completely mask all the other genes in the white snake. So this is what happens if you work lesser into this combination, the black pastel, the blackhead, and the lesser. Take a look at this. This is pretty amazing how you get these really crazy stripes in a lot of these combos right down the top of the snake. As a matter of fact, a lot of people think that the lesser is pretty much the same thing as the butter. A lot of people think the butter and the lesser are the same thing. And I actually pulled up a butter combination here, and we can kind of compare it to this one. Take a look at this. This has some really strong stripes right down the back, and kind of this almost like a kind of really small, kind of a squiggly pattern right along the side. And here is the butter version of the same thing. Take a look at this. It's almost exactly the same, and it kind of has the same kind of a squiggly line right down the side. It looks like there's a little bit of difference, but a lot of times there can be a lot of difference between different versions of the same gene, especially when you're talking about three different genes coming together. And you can't really, pick out the difference based on the difference between the butter and the lesser, but it makes for a really amazing combination. So here is the Engi. The Engi is a really popular gene, and essentially what the Engi does is it really reduces the pattern. Sometimes it really reduces it to almost tiger stripes, and sometimes you get a slight reduction in pattern. And a lot of times the Engi will bring out a lot of the oranges, kind of a yellow-orange color in a lot of combinations. It'll kind of change the color. So this is what happens if you work Engi into this combination, the black head, the black pastel, and the Engi. And take a look at this combination. This is a really crazy looking snake. Probably one of my favorite dark morphs. It's really bringing out a lot of the coppery color from the Engi. And kind of the weird thing is it doesn't really seem like it's reducing the pattern as much as a lot of Engi combinations, but it's really changing the color. Pretty amazing combination. So here is the Mystic. The Mystic is actually also in the blue-eyed leucistic, but it doesn't always make an all-white snake. It's kind of one of the exceptions. If you actually mix Mystic with Mojave, you get a Mystic Potion, which is a purplish snake instead of an all-white snake. If you get a Super Mystic, it actually is also kind of a purplish, like a lavender color snake too. And here's what happens if you work Mystic into the Nightbringer. Take a look at this. This is a pretty amazing combo. And it's kind of interesting on this one. Sometimes it has a really strong stripe right down the top, and on this one it seems like most of the stripe is gone, but you still get this little squiggly line right down the side in a really super dark snake. It is a really impressive combination. So here is the Mojave. Speaking of Mystic Mojaves, the Mojave is also in the blue-eyed leucistic complex. And the Mojave, as a matter of fact, if you take the Mojave and you cross it with the lesser and make the lesser Mojave, a lot of people say that is the ultimate blue-eyed leucistic, like the brightest white snake that you can get with really super bright blue eyes. And a lot of times in the blue-eyed leucistic complex, you make the all-white snake with the blue eyes. Sometimes it can have big eyes, almost like bug eyes, and sometimes it can have really tiny micro eyes. And a lot of people say if you mix the Mojave with the lesser, you get pretty much normal looking eyes, the perfect blue-eyed leucistic that you can actually make. And here's what happens if you work Mojave into the Nightbringer. Take a look at this. This is a really amazing combination, and you kind of get an idea of it. It's almost like variations of a theme. You get this really strong stripe right down the top of the back, and you get this little squiggly line right on the side of the snake. And sometimes you can actually slightly change the color of the combination. And as a matter of fact, this is actually the Blackhead Black Magic. So if you actually look at these genes, the Black Pastel and the Mojave is actually kind of the nickname for that combination is the Black Magic. So here is the spot nose, and when it comes to spot nose, the first thing I think of is either clown or leopard. If you actually make spot nose with leopard, you get some really scrambled up patterns and a really high contrast. Probably one of my favorite combinations, and it really is, as a standalone morph, the spot nose can be pretty variable. Sometimes it almost looks like a normal, sometimes it'll have a really strong stripe right down the top, sometimes it can be kind of yellow like this one. But to pick out the spot nose, usually you look at the pattern on the head. If it has kind of a crazy pattern, you pretty much know it's spot nose. And here's what happens if you work spot nose into the Nightbringer. Take a look at this. And this one is kind of hard to see, but if you actually look at the side of this, look at the crazy pattern on the side of the snake that the spot nose bring. And you really can see the really strong stripe in almost all of these combos, with usually a high contrast between the black and the kind of the really bright stripe coming right down the top. Makes for a really interesting combo. So here is probably the craziest one that I've seen over here. There wasn't a whole lot to choose from, so I was kind of cherry picking some of the best stuff with just a few to pick from. And this is probably one of the craziest combos, working the Nightbringer into the lavender albino. And this is what a lavender albino is. As a matter of fact, this is a hatchling lavender albino. As these age and mature, a lot of times the white in the lavender albino turns like a lavender purplish color. Pretty awesome combination. And this is actually two genes. This is two copies of the lavender albino gene. So it's actually a recessive morph. You need two copies of the gene. So if you actually bred this to the Nightbringer, essentially what you do is you produce hets, and then you'd have to actually breed the hets back together to get a visual. But when you do get a visual, take a look at this crazy snake. This is one of the most craziest combinations that I've ever seen over here on Morphmarket. This is amazing. This is the Blackhead Black black pastel, lavender, albino. Really crazy combination. And if you actually take lavender, albino, and work in the black pastel, a lot of times what it'll do is it'll really give you a high white lavender albino, but I've never seen one as high white as this. It almost seems like the blackhead is even making it more white and reducing a lot of the pattern. That is one of the most amazing snakes. And I was kind of wondering about the price on this. Yeah, this is a really expensive snake. This one's actually sold for $2,250 just last year. Pretty amazing. All right, so it is time for the question of the day. And Nerdy Cherry Kitten asks, if I start pairing up my ball pythons in October, when do I stop pairing them? And that is a very good question. I actually start pairing up my ball pythons on October 15th every single year. I have it down to the day. And usually what I do is I cycle through my males, through all my females. You know, sometimes if I'm doing like just one male and one female, I'll pair them up for a few days and then I'll separate them, usually for 2 or 3 weeks, and then I'll pair them up again. And if I'm pairing multiple females, I'll do like 3 or 4 days per female, kind of cycle through all the females and then separate them and kind of feed them and give them a break before I pair them up again. And I'll keep cycling through my males, through the females. I usually go for about 3 or 4 months, and I usually stop pairing up, I'd say maybe in January. In January, you know, you pretty much, the problem is if you keep pairing past January, essentially what happens is you can breed some really late in the season, which means you'll get eggs really late by the end of the summer, sometimes really kind of late into the fall. And if you don't have enough time between when they lay eggs until you can actually get them back on food and build some weight where you can actually breed them again, sometimes you have to take the next year off. So kind of what I do is I breed them for 3 or 4 months and then I just stop. I don't keep breeding, because sometimes if you keep breeding them, you'll have just random eggs at all times of the year. And I really like really defined breeding cycles where you can breed them up and then you can actually expect eggs at a certain time, and then you have hatchlings all at a certain time, and then you can kind of take a break and you're not always constantly, you know, searching for eggs at all times of the year. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.